If I were to ask you who the most underrated character in the MCU is, everybody would have a different answer. Whether it be Wong, War Machine, or Madison with 2 N's and 1 Y, but it's not where you think, they're all incredibly valid answers that nobody could argue with, especially Madison. And considering just how large the MCU is with new characters showing up practically every day, it's hard to say who the true most underrated character is. Well, at least it was, because I have figured it out with a definitive answer, and there is nothing you can do to tell me otherwise. It's none other than my beloved ghost, Ava Starr. Oh, come on, you all knew this was coming. Not only was she in the thumbnail, but I've been pushing my ghost propaganda non-stop, and I will not rest until she is etched into the history books. But it's not enough to mention her in every other video. It's long overdue that Ghost gets her own dedicated video, because I need the world to understand just how cool she really is. Ever since I watched Ant-Man and the Wasp all the way back in 2018, I have been infatuated with her character. She was a well-written antagonist with a cool power set and a great design. What's not to love? But I felt like I was taking crazy pills or something because nobody else seemed to be giving Ghost the credit she deserved. I was isolated on this island of appreciation with 3 other people who saw the vision right from the start. Especially considering that this was coming at a time when one of the biggest complaints against the MCU was that they had weak villains. And we got the run of the century as they went from Killmonger to Thanos to Ghost in the same year. And that may be sacrilegious to some to include her in the conversation with those two, but I promise you, she belongs. Ghost was a breath of fresh air in the MCU and the different kind of antagonist that they desperately needed at the time. And then after that, she immediately disappeared for 7 years, which felt like a personal attack against me. How could they have gifted me such an interesting character only to rip her away like this? I'm telling you, if she was in Quantumania, that movie would have been at least like 20% better. I mean, at least she got to be the best part of Secret Invasion, which is admittedly a very low bar, but seeing her name on screen got me unreasonably excited. Now that Ghost is finally back in my life thanks to Thunderbolts positioning her as a member of the new Avengers, which is insane to think about, I figured it's time that I finally explained what makes this character so special for the people who still haven't seen the vision. For starters, she has some of the coolest powers ever. Intangibility and invisibility let her do some of the most creative action in the entire MCU. Whether that be suplexing someone onto a table and phasing through it to safety, phasing through a car to kick someone on the other side, or phasing through a knife only to catch it on the other side and throw it back at someone, there isn't a single hand-to-hand fight that she can't win. Unless you put her up the Sentry, I guess, but he's basically a god. That doesn't count. But also, it's that vulnerability that makes her interesting and adds real stakes to everything she does. And the effects surrounding her powers go so crazy. I love the glitchy chromatic aberration that hovers around her anytime she moves, portraying her as this kinetic ball of energy disintegrating at the seams. It's genuinely some really impressive effects work, but it also tells an important story in a very creative and visual way. When we finally get her back in Thunderbolts, the glitchiness is gone as she's left with this chromatic aura that follows her, showing that she's gained more control over the way she moves. It's a very small detail, but one that I really appreciate. And oh my god, she's currently going 2 for 2 on costumes. They simply cannot miss with her designs. Both fits are so unique in the MCU and suit her character perfectly, but it's way more than just the way she looks that makes Ghost interesting. And that says a lot because Hannah is breathtaking and serving face in pretty much every single scene, but it's the tragedy of her life story that spoke to me in a way that not nearly enough people talk about. But here's the thing, if we want to do this right, we need to start from the beginning. I know that's a cliche, but I've always wanted to say it. Ghost is very different from her comic counterpart because she's basically an original character, and I think that's for the better. In the comics, Ghost is this mysterious Iron Man villain known for his corporate sabotage, and that's pretty much it. He'll appear on the Thunderbolts every now and then, but he doesn't have much depth as a character. He's pretty much been coasting off of aura and hype moments since he was created in the Stone Age of 1987. And don't get me wrong, him being a corporate saboteur is beast as hell. Down with capitalism all the way. But the MCU took a character that was pretty one note in the comics and turned them into one of the most tragic figures in the universe. And that says a lot because it feels like everybody in the MCU is competing for gold in the Trauma Olympics. For starters, her father is canonically the MCU's version of Egghead, so already not off to the hottest start, but said father was exposed by Hank Pym for wanting to steal his quantum tech, fired from S.H.I.E.L.D., and then had his name publicly discredited, which forced him to relocate his family to Argentina so he could continue his research off the books, which has historically never gone wrong. So not only does Ava grow up living a very abnormal life, but the moment her father is about to have a scientific breakthrough that could change everything, it quite literally blows up in his face. Ava, being the sweetheart and natural-born hero that she is, didn't want him to die alone and ran back to save him, which is heartbreaking in its own right, but it is heaven compared to what comes next in her life. She was given what felt like a fate worse than death, as Ava was forced to live in a world without anybody to care for her. And if that wasn't enough, the quantum explosion rendered her intangible and unable to form any real connection with anyone. God clearly plays favorites and took it all out on poor Ava. Do you know how sad it must be as a kid to not be able to grab things? Touching random stuff is half the fun of being a kid, especially considering the fact that she was placed in an orphanage all while still dealing with her new condition. She was practically invisible to all the other kids as she wasn't able to do something as simple as playing with them. This is in the 90s too, so there's basically nothing else to do but play with other kids. That kind of boredom would turn anyone into a supervillain. Her childhood was ripped away from her by something completely out of her own control, but in spite of that, her innate sense of goodness persisted thanks to the help of Bill Foster. Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne is in these movies, even if he doesn't remember being in them. Bill is without a doubt the most important figure in Ava's life, as he was able to actually help her gain some control over these newfound abilities. But still, she couldn't fully take control of her phasing. Despite helping her gain the ability to touch again, it didn't change the fact that she was in constant pain as every cell in her body was ripped apart and stitched back together over and over every day. Basically what it feels like to be on Twitter for more than 5 minutes. Bill quickly became a father figure to Ava as he promised to cure her condition and get her life back, which is incredibly wholesome. That kind of structure and family is exactly what she needed, and it's even better when the guy helping you is a genius and the former Goliath. Things were finally starting to look up for Ava for the first time in God knows how long, so surely it wouldn't get infinitely worse. Yeah, so while Bill might have only wanted the best for Ava, his employers at S.H.I.E.L.D. had very different intentions for her. He was only able to hold them off for so long before they began their test to take advantage of her condition. S.H.I.E.L.D. really didn't care that she was just a kid, as they started training her to become a stealth operative. Ava was robbed of her innocence and forcibly hardened into a cold and ruthless assassin who could do S.H.I.E.L.D.'s dirty work. The entire time, her suffering was prolonged as S.H.I.E.L.D. dangled that cure in front of her like a carrot on a stick. Years of killing people in dangerous operations that nobody else could, all while being in constant agony, basically turned her into a completely different person. Now so much more vicious as she had the heartbreaking realization that the cure she desperately craved would never come. Her life was effectively ruined and there was nothing she could do about it as she was trapped in this new role as an assassin. She was basically a conscious Winter Soldier as she was forced into this life of doing their bidding, otherwise she would die a slow and very painful death. But at least she got this sick containment suit, I guess. And that's gotta count for something, right? Her hopelessness continued to grow more and more as there seemed to be no end in sight on this cycle of manipulation. But thanks to a certain star-spangled man with a plan, her life was about to get a whole lot more exciting. All it took was Captain America dismantling S.H.I.E.L.D. for Ava to finally be free for the first time in her life. No longer controlled by the government and forced into this role as an unwilling assassin. Now she was in control of her own destiny for once. Things were actually starting to look up for her this time, which could only mean one thing: it was about to get a lot worse. Ava is the living embodiment of "we're so back and it's so over, I swear." Every new high is immediately met with an even lower low, and this was no different. With S.H.I.E.L.D. gone, they lost out on the necessary resources they needed to keep her stabilized and alive. Thankfully, Bill was able to build her a quantum energy chamber to slow the decay of her body, but that was just prolonging the inevitable. Her body instantly became a ticking time bomb the moment S.H.I.E.L.D. went down, and that newfound independence became a blessing and a curse as she had to find a way to survive with nothing but a suit and a dream. Thankfully, our old pals Ant-Man and the Wasp inadvertently found the exact cure she needed. It may have taken them 4 years, but they were in the process of rebuilding the infamous quantum tunnel to rescue Janet. And so what if Ava might have to commit a few crimes to get her hands on it? We've all been there. She only had a few days left to live before she destabilized out of existence forever. Can you really blame her for going to such extreme lengths? I support Baba Yaga's rights and wrongs. Ava finally had her life back in her own hands, and it was immediately being threatened by forces outside of her own control. I would do the exact same thing if I were in her shoes, only it would be infinitely less cool. The fear of death is already real enough, but the tragedy of it all is so heartbreaking to watch. She made it very clear to Scott that she didn't want to be doing any of this. She wasn't going to hurt him unless he got in her way. Her priority was entirely just keeping herself alive. She's killed way more people than she ever wanted to in life, and it's not like she's itching to kill more. Ava is just just doing whatever it takes to survive, and while violence is her last resort, she'll use it if it's the difference between life and death. Unfortunately though, Ava was blinded by her own fears to the point that she was pushing away the only person who ever cared for her, Bill. She had been let down too many times by people who said they would cure her, and she wasn't willing to let this opportunity slip away. She didn't have time to take chances or listen to false promises. Ava was just one suitcase-sized laboratory away from getting all she could have ever wanted in life. And if it meant killing Janet in the process, she was willing to make that call. And I mean, to be fair to her, Janet had been missing for like decades at this point, so it wasn't like her being gone would have really changed anything for the Ant fam, but I digress. Bill trying to save Janet's life felt like another betrayal to Ava, as he cared more about his enemy's wife than his surrogate daughter, and that betrayal cut deep in her eyes. But thankfully, Janet's successful return was the best thing that could have ever happened to her, as she lent out her hand to give Ava exactly what she wanted. Not just enough healing particles to give her more time to live, but a new family that was understanding of her. People who saw through her pain to the person that was hurting beneath all of it. That was the cure she really needed all this time, as they accepted her and finally gave her a place to call home. Even Bill refused to leave her side with this undying sense of loyalty that was a foreign concept to her. It finally seemed like things were going to take a turn for the better for once. Ava had friends with the resources they needed to actually heal her of this condition. And then they all died and she was left stranded alone once again for 5 years, because of course they did. Ava Starr is not allowed to be happy for more than 10 minutes at a time before the universe sends an angry rock collector to kill half the people in it just to spite her. Ghost is not a villain. She is a survivor. A misunderstood anti-hero in the making who is fueled by pure resilience, shaped by trauma, and fighting for control. She hasn't known a moment of peace her entire life and was left completely helpless after S.H.I.E.L.D. fell. They turned her into a walking weapon without a safety net to fall back on, so the saddest thing is that when she finally gains control of her own life again, she's forced to return to the only thing she's good at, no matter how much she hates it. Granted, Ava's status during the blip is completely unknown and probably filled with enough trauma to make someone end it all, but she comes out of it all working for Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. With no other options to turn to, she's forced into this ever so familiar role as a mercenary. But for the first time ever, this path actually has a light at the end of the tunnel. After a few years of doing Val's dirty work and becoming wanted in over 15 countries across the globe, which is so based of her, Ghost was unknowingly sent on a suicide mission to kill Taskmaster. And boy, did she accomplish her mission. Shot her straight in the head like she was some common goon. And while we could argue all day and night whether that was the right thing to do, it was that moment that changed Ava's life forever. After being alone for so long, she was finally amongst other people like her. People who have done bad things and hurt those they care about for selfish reasons. People who have been tortured and forced into a careless system with nothing else to rely on. People who have traveled the globe as an alienated assassin, hardened into a ruthless killer. She doesn't have much in common with Alexei, but the rest of them are people who can actually empathize with her and already know what it's like to live with that guilt on their conscience. She sees herself in them, and because of that, she cares for them, building this complicated friendship that only becomes stronger the longer they know each other. What I love about Ava's role in Thunderbolts is that it highlights her heroicism and shows that the path to redemption is just a few steps away. We get 3 very important full circle moments that show us how that little kid who just wanted to protect her father is still a part of her. First is during the vault scene when she comes back to save everyone, and the other is later on in the vault escape when Ava shows up with the car to rescue them. Both times she came back for the team. She had no reason to, considering the fact that she knew they had done terrible things, but that innate sense of goodness that had been inside her all along finally got to show its face again. She knew they didn't deserve to die after they had been abandoned by their countries just like she had before, and wanted to give them the second chance that the Ant fam gave her all those years ago. That's how she relates to Alexei. They were both abandoned by their countries. I knew there had to be some kind of connection they could bond over. It is a huge moment of growth and a defining character trait of hers that she always comes back. The third and most important moment is during the final act when she saves a civilian from a crashing helicopter. She had an out and could have escaped before going on another suicide mission to stop the void, but once again she comes back. What makes this one different though is that she saves someone for the first time in her life. It effectively completes her transition into an anti-hero as she goes out of her way to offer someone the help that she's always wanted. It's genuinely really sweet to see and shows just how far she's come as a character. Being part of this team changed her for the better and gave her actual friends that she could rely on. People who actually had her own best interests in mind and only wanted the best for her. She made Bill proud and got to become the hero he always knew she could be, and for the first time in her life, everything didn't immediately come crashing down around her right after that. While the circumstances to get there may have been the most unexpected, she's announced as a member of the new Avengers, which is insane to think about. Like, what do you mean this character I hyper fixated on 7 years ago is now on the Avengers. She went from fighting an Avenger to becoming one in a very natural character arc that has only made me appreciate her more. And now to know that we can expect to see Ava in Doomsday interacting with the Fantastic Four and the X-Men is beyond surreal to me. For a character who's only made 2 appearances in the MCU up to this point, Ghost has left a lasting impact on me. From the moment we met her in Ant-Man and the Wasp, she stuck out as this tragic figure that I couldn't help but root for. Her story is a testament to resilience as she fought to survive one day at a time. I hesitate to even call her a villain because she was only ever on the defense. And sure, I mean, you could argue that she's done some bad things, but she's never really had a choice in the matter. Anytime she's been able to take control of her destiny, she's always operated in favor of the greater good. Thunderbolts has proven that and fully transitioned her into this role as one of the MCU's most complicated anti-heroes, maximizing her very minimal screen time and becoming a truly great reinvention of the comic book character. While Ava may be a ghost in her own life, her story of redemption and heroism is incredibly inspiring and made me a lifelong fan of her character. And I am praying that you see the vision at this point, because if not, what are you still doing here? Now that I have hopefully created thousands of new Ghost fans, I need all of you to meet me outside of Marvel Studios next Monday at 9 a.m. We're gonna storm their offices and we aren't leaving until that Ghost cinematic universe is born. I need a Ghost series, a Ghost movie, a Ghost trilogy, a Ghost theme park, a Ghost island, a Ghost planet. I need total Ghost world domination. Or if we can't do that, at least a new Funko Pop would be nice. There's so little Ghost merch, it has driven me crazy. But who do you think is the most underrated character in the MCU? I would genuinely love to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below. And while you're at it, you may as well give the video a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you don't do it, I'll make what Ghost did to Taskmaster look like child's play. I don't fully know how yet, but just trust me, you'll regret it.